Practically every day you read in the papers or hear on TV all about hospital discharge backlogs and shortages of beds in care homes. Does CASCAIDr see lots of arguments as to who should be paying for the next stage onwards?
Yes, a great deal of issues arise out of that particular problem. I think there's almost a deliberate fog going on out there as between what we call beds and what the names of the beds signify. You can get interim beds, you can get discharge to assess beds, then there's reablement beds, there's rehabilitation beds, there's step-down beds. I've even heard a bed called an empowerment bed, would you believe? And the point is, all of those beds are free to the user, so people are less unwilling to get up and leave their hospital bed. But that's only the beginning of the problem. With interim beds and discharge to assess beds, the purpose of those beds is for when somebody's ready to leave hospital, but the NHS hasn't yet been able to decide whether they're so sick still that they deserve NHS continuing healthcare. That's free care for the foreseeable future. And therefore the NHS pays for the person's next bed because they haven't yet done their thinking. The trouble is they often put such people into a very nice, posh, expensive care home, and then 6 weeks later, or however many weeks later, when the person has stabilised, that person has come to love their care home, and then they don't want to leave, but the bed is much more costly than the local authority would generally pay for. So then there is trouble. If you compare that with rehab beds are meant to be paid for by the NHS before somebody is even assessed for continuing healthcare. And rehab is all about the concept of them recovering to a plateau sort of a level, at which point their long-term care can be sorted out. That sounds terribly like a reablement bed. Rehab, reablement, reablement, rehab. But the difference is that a reablement bed is paid for by the local authority, and it's about making a person able to go back to a state of independence. And the point is that even though all those beds are free, the local authority is paying for a reablement bed, and they're busy running out of such beds around the country because too many care homes have closed. An extra complexity with a reablement bed, if there isn't one at the exact moment when the person is ready for one coming out of hospital, is that they'll go into some other sort of care home placement, and then the council will want to charge the person the ordinary fee that they normally otherwise would. And yet, if it had been a reablement bed, it would have been free for the first 6 weeks. So you can see that there is complete mayhem potential out there from people just not understanding the differences between these things.
I've heard that in areas where home care has run out because of staffing difficulties, people are being put into care homes by councils as the next best thing. Does that have legal implications?
Oh, absolutely, yes. For a start, it may well make somebody deteriorate. It can de-skill you to be done unto, which is often the culture in a care home because of the extremity of people's needs, rather than being helped or coaxed to do stuff for yourself. So that can actually be bad for people, and I don't think it's acceptable. Sometimes you find that people who really couldn't be left at home without the special type of reablement care that they should have been given, you find that if they're put in a care home, they will be charged what's called a low respite fee because it's envisaged that they're only going to be there temporarily. So they may still feel that they're doing okay. But if you think about it, they're only in that care home because the council has run out of home care, and that's a commissioning failure. And home care would always be less than the cost of a care home. So it's not clear to me in that situation that some clients are not being overcharged. I think that in that situation a good authority would acknowledge their own failure, and they would ensure that whatever they are charging the person for the care home isn't more than what the cost of the care would have been if they'd received it via home care services, i.e. services that visited the person at home. Of course, a really good authority would just crack on and find more home care. And that isn't a counsel of perfection. It envisages buying more care by paying more money so that companies have got more money with which to attract decent staff. What is really cheeky, and what happens in the real world, is that the person who's been popped into a care home moulders there for longer than they should, then they deteriorate and they are reassessed, and magically they now need to be in a care home, and because they're settled and the family wants to keep them there, the council then says to the family, well, you'll have to pay a top-up to keep this person in this particular care home because it costs more than our usual rate. And what's wrong with that, of course, is that the local government ombudsman has done loads of reports and really sterling work about what is required for a valid assessment when a person might have to move from a care home. The moral is that councils have to decide, first and foremost, whether they can even therapeutically appropriately expect the person to move. And if they can't, then the council is obliged to pay full cost for that care home. It's only if the person could feasibly be cared for elsewhere that it's then appropriate to ask the family for a top-up. But that is being lost in translation, and councils get away with what I call toxic top-ups all the time. So that kind of stuff is bad enough when it's a self-funding person who's been paying privately and their money has gone down to the capital threshold for the state taking over. But it's doubly shocking if the person should never have been put in a care home in the first place, and the real problem is that the council has run out of home care.